Hey everyone, welcome back to all my listeners. This is episode 8 in season 16. Today is Wednesday, October 22nd, 2025. My name is Sonal Patel, and this is the Paint the Medical Picture podcast series. All right, you guys, good morning and welcome back to everybody. Hope you guys are doing really well this third week of October. I know things have cooled down here in Chicagoland over the past week or so, and we've been seeing a lot of rainfall, which of course upsets me because it mutes my fall foliage, all those beautiful reds and yellows that are popping. But nonetheless, we were in need of rain for quite a few months. So it tends to always happen during fall season when my colors get ruined, but it is what it is. So anyways, you guys, I hope you guys are all right, hanging in there. I just celebrated my Diwali on Monday and my Sal Mubarak, or my New Year, on Tuesday. So, lots of celebrations and hope and gratitude to carry me through the next year. So, lots of things I'm looking forward to. Anyways, you guys, so today's episode is going to be short and sweet. Today's Newsworthy is going to be featuring something new, a rather unusual piece of news on a claims hold by the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, CMS. And in my trusty tip, I'm going to continue focusing a little bit on Breast Cancer Awareness Month and continue on biopsies, like I discussed last week, for fine needle aspiration breast biopsies. Today, I want to shine my spotlight on percutaneous needle biopsies. And I'm going to go ahead and close out and round out today's episode with another remarkable quote on resilience from Marianne Williamson. All right, you guys, let's get into it. So in today's Newsworthy, this is unusual yet very important news based on all that is going on with the state of the country. Last week on October 15th, CMS issued a MLN Connects special edition regarding the news. They specifically address a claims hold update as of October 15th. Now it reads, claims hold update. In anticipation of possible congressional action, CMS has instructed all Medicare administrative contractors, MACs, to continue to temporarily hold claims with dates of service of October 1st, 2025 and later for services impacted by the expired Medicare legislative payment provisions passed under the Full Year Continuing Appropriations and Extensions Act of 2025. This includes all claims paid under the Medicare Physician Fee Schedule, ground ambulance transport claims, and all federally qualified health center claims, or FQHC claims. Providers may continue to submit these claims, but payment will not be released until the hold is lifted. Absent congressional action beginning October 1st, 2025, many of the statutory limitations that were in place for Medicare telehealth services prior to the COVID-19 public health emergency took effect again for services that are not behavioral health services. These include prohibition of many services provided to beneficiaries in their homes and outside of rural areas, and hospice recertifications that require a face-to-face encounter. In the absence of congressional action, practitioners who choose to perform telehealth services that are not payable by Medicare on or after October 1st, 2025 may want to evaluate providing beneficiaries with an advanced beneficiary notice of non-coverage, or an ABN form. Further information on the use of ABN, including ABN forms and form instructions, are found on the cms.gov website. Now, practitioners should monitor congressional action and may choose to hold claims associated with telehealth services that are not payable by Medicare in the absence of congressional action. Now, CMS notes that the Bipartisan Budget Act of 2018 allows clinicians in applicable Medicare Shared Savings Program accountable care organizations, or ACOs, to provide and receive payment for covered telehealth services to certain Medicare beneficiaries without geographic restriction and in the beneficiary's home. There is no special application or approval process for applicable ACOs or their ACO participants or ACO providers and suppliers. Clinicians in applicable ACOs can furnish and receive payment for covered telehealth services under these special telehealth flexibilities. And now it's time for my best practice tips in Trusty Tip. Now, breast cancer awareness spotlights, right? I try my best to feature them here in my podcast as well, although they are showering my LinkedIn page. So please go to my LinkedIn, connect with me so you can make sure that you can find all of those resources and research materials that I do provide in links on LinkedIn. Now, my spotlight is going to continue on breast biopsies, just like last week when I talked about FNA or fine needle aspiration breast biopsies. So in today's new compliance tip, I wanted to focus on breast biopsies again. In particular today, let's go over percutaneous needle biopsies, or PNB, to make sure that you're understanding those code descriptions and how to code compliantly and bill for these surgical services. So what is a PNB breast biopsy? Again, percutaneous needle biopsy. Now, last week, I went over those FNA biopsies, fine needle aspiration, and their thinner needle gauge. But our PNBs, they use a larger needle gauge to remove a bigger tissue sample, a procedure that is more complex than an FNA biopsy and can involve the use of a local anesthetic to numb the area of the body from which the sample will be taken. Providers commonly use this technique on larger bodily structures, such as the breast. Now, here's a big tip. Remember, PNBs involve more work, so payers commonly reimburse them at a higher level than FNAs. Now, currently, the Medicare National Average Non-Facility Fee for CPT code 10021, again, last week's fine needle aspiration biopsy without imaging guidance, first lesion, is $97.69, while Medicare reimburses a PNB procedure, such as CPT code 19100, which is for biopsy of breast, percutaneous, needle core, not using imaging guidance, separate procedure, at a rate of $141.68. So you can see there is a big difference there. All right. Now, how do we go about finding the PNB codes in our CPT books? Well, those are trickier to find, as most of them are anatomically specific. But of course, I'm just talking about the breast. So this means that you're going to have to use that CPT code book index or the electronic version for the index, where you will find the majority of them listed by anatomic site under the entry for needle biopsy. Now, the index will then direct you to such codes as CPT code 19100, again, for biopsy of breast, percutaneous, needle core, not using imaging guidance, separate procedure for a breast biopsy. Now, you'll also find some of these PNB procedures in the index under the entry for biopsy. Now, what happens when the multiple lesions need to be biopsied? Because some breasts will have more than one lesion. Or what do you do if there's imaging guidance that is actually used? What happens then? The imaging guidance PNB procedures start at CPT code 19081. So there's a big pro tip. It starts right there at CPT code 19081, which is defined as biopsy breast with placement of breast localization device or devices, for example, those clips or metallic pellets, when performed, and the imaging of the biopsy specimen when performed, percutaneous first lesion, including stereotactic guidance. So they specify the imaging in that CPT code. So make sure you read all of that code definition to make sure you're capturing the accurate modality of imaging. Now, the notes underneath that section of CPT code also state that, quote, breast biopsy procedures may be performed via a percutaneous or an approach or an open approach and with or without imaging guidance. So the CPT book tells us even more helpful information, in my opinion. So it goes on and talks about percutaneous image-guided breast biopsies, including the placement of breast localization devices, when performed, are reported with, here's the couple of codes here, 19081, 19082, 19083, 19084, 19085, and 19086. Now, imaging codes for CPT codes 76098, 76942, 77002, and 77021 may not be separately reported for the same lesion. Because again, remember, those imaging codes in the 70,000 range are going to be bundled into the breast biopsy code, right, for the PNB biopsies in that 19,000 code range that I just discussed. So we have to make sure that we are not double dipping and separately reporting out those radiology section of codes because they're already included in the surgical procedure definition. When more than one percutaneous breast biopsy with or without localization device placement is performed using the same imaging modality, use an add-on code, whether the additional service or services is on the same or contralateral breast. If additional percutaneous biopsies with or without localization device placements are performed using different imaging modalities, report another primary code for each additional biopsy with or without localization device placement performed using a different image guidance modality. Now, to report a bilateral image-guided breast biopsy, report the codes 19081, 19083, 19085 for the initial biopsy. The contralateral and each additional breast image-guided biopsy are then reported with CPT code 19082, 19084, and 19086. So really make sure you read those instructional directions in our CPT code books before you start coding your claims. It's critical to keep these types of surgical procedures well documented from our surgeons. Now, remember, pay close attention to your provider's operative report, right? Because it's that documentation that is key to helping you understand what your code selection is going to be. And I always advise, do not just code from the header or the title of the operative report. That's a very, very easy mistake that you can avoid because the depths, the nitty-gritty details in a very well-written surgical report are going to help you identify what particular codes you need to be choosing for that PNB subset. So when the documentation paints the medical picture with clarity and vibrancy from the onset of care, then a certified medical coder can abstract the often complex breast PNB biopsy procedure codes with accuracy. And finally, I focus season 16 Spark on resilience. I want this 16th season Spark to be filled with our world's thought leaders, writers, artists, philosophers, everyone who inspires us with their statements involving resilience. So, in this week's inspiring quote in Spark is from Marianne Williamson. As you let your own light shine, you indirectly give others permission to do the same. Absolutely true, right? This is another deeply moving quote. It reminds us that we are allowed to shine our light, to share with others what makes us unique and amazing and someone to be celebrated. This quote reminds us that it is because of all of those challenges we have faced that we do shine brighter. And don't forget, it is the people who shine brightly that recognize the light in others. I'm happy Marianne Williamson's spark burns brightly and inspires so very many. All right, you guys, that wraps up today's short and sweet episode. Now, just wanted to remind you, just a few days left before my upcoming workshop this Saturday, when I'm going to be talking with my good colleague, Keisha Wilson, about the telehealth playbook for 2025 through 2026. Now, we're also going to be featuring an amazing leader and practitioner in global telemedicine with our keynote speaker, Dr. Michelle Griffith. So we're going to be talking about all things telehealth, what is current and upcoming after October 1st to remain compliant. So just wanted to wish you guys all a very, very amazing and happy week ahead, and happy Diwali and Sal Mubarak to those of you in my audience who celebrate. All right, you guys, thank you so much for listening on today's episode. And I hope every week with me brings you closer to helping your providers paint a masterpiece. See you next Wednesday.